In the vastness of the galaxy, where ancient empires rose and fell, humanity's name had long been forgotten. The Vorkan Dominion, a ruthless empire spanning countless worlds, ruled without challenge. The once promising human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy had either been wiped out or absorbed into the vast, unfeeling expanse of the Vorkan territories. Humanity, now reduced to mere relics of a bygone era, were rarely spoken of, and when they were, it was in hushed tones, a shadow of a race that had vanished from the stars. However, there was one story that refused to die, passed along in whispers, from tavern to tavern, from one generation to the next. The Phantom Warship. No one truly knew where it came from or who built it, but the myth was pervasive, its details sketchy, its meaning elusive. Some spoke of it as a weapon designed to protect humanity from an unimaginable enemy. Others claimed it was a failed project, an attempt at creating something so powerful that it consumed its creators before they could finish it. Regardless of the version, the one common thread in every retelling was this: the Phantom Warship was never completed, yet its legend lived on. The myth was mostly laughed off, dismissed as the ramblings of people clinging to hope. But for some, the idea of the warship wasn't a mere fairy tale. It was the possibility of a hidden power, lying dormant, waiting to resurface when the galaxy needed it most. And among the stars, there were always those who held on to such possibilities, particularly when their backs were pressed against the wall. On a cold, dimly lit bridge aboard the Warden, a small human vessel equipped for deep space reconnaissance, Captain Area Vance gazed at the flickering hologram of an ancient map. The crew, composed of survivors from the fall of one of humanity's last strongholds, had been searching for any sign of hope, any hint of a weapon, a resource, or a fragment of technology that could help them turn the tide against the Vorkans. "Anything new, Lieutenant?" Captain Vance's voice cut through the silence. Lieutenant Maya Trask, a former communications officer, was hunched over her console, scanning through encrypted signals and outdated transmission frequencies. She looked up, her face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, I think you need to see this." The hologram shifted, the ancient map being replaced by a transmission signal. It was faint, distorted, but it was there. An old, almost forgotten frequency, a signal that shouldn't have existed, not after all these years. The message was garbled at first, then cleared enough to reveal a series of coordinates and cryptic words. "The Phantom Warship awaits. Its power is yours to claim. The coordinates are set. Come, if you dare." The room fell silent. Captain Vance's heart raced. "This is impossible. The Phantom Warship." She trailed off, her voice thick with disbelief. If the message was real, if the coordinates were leading them to something connected to the warship, it could change everything. But there was no time to waste on speculation. The Vorkans were always watching, always searching for any sign of rebellion, and the signal might draw their attention. The decision was clear. Prepare the crew. We're going to follow those coordinates. Whatever we find, we move fast. We don't get a second chance at this. As the crew readied themselves for the journey, a question lingered in the air. Was this truly the salvation they had been hoping for, or would the Phantom Warship be yet another myth that ended in tragedy? The Warden drifted silently through the void of space, its engines a low hum as it followed the coordinates transmitted by the mysterious signal. Captain Area Vance stood in the command center, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Her fingers drummed against the surface of her console, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her. Every step they took further into unknown space was a gamble. If this was a trap, if the Vorkans had somehow caught wind of their pursuit, there would be no escape. "Captain, we've crossed the outer rim of Vorkan territory," said Lieutenant Trask, her voice steady but laced with tension. "We're on the edge of the forgotten sector now. The coordinates, this system, wasn't even on the charts until recently." "How far are we from the coordinates?" Captain Vance asked, turning to face her officer. "Less than 2 hours," Trask replied, her hands flying across the console as she plotted their course. "But, Captain, this sector is, well, it's a graveyard. The entire region is littered with derelict ships, broken stations. It looks like it's been untouched for centuries. I don't know if I'd want to know why." Vance felt a chill at the thought. The galaxy had its share of forgotten places, spaces where entire fleets had been lost to time and war. But this system, this graveyard, felt different. It was as if the universe itself had cast it aside, letting it wither and fade into obscurity. Could the Phantom Warship truly lie hidden in such a place? "We're not turning back," Vance said, her voice firm. "If there's even a chance that the warship is real, we find it. We can't afford to let this slip through our fingers." "Understood, Captain," Trask replied, though the unease in her eyes was impossible to miss. "Course is set. I'll keep an eye on any anomalies, nothing out of the ordinary so far." As the ship cut through the darkness, Captain Vance walked over to the viewing port, gazing at the expanse before them. It had been years since humanity had tasted true hope, years since they had dared believe in something greater than mere survival. The Vorkans had made sure of that. Their brutal expansion had wiped out any semblance of human civilization, scattering any remaining colonies like dust in the wind. The few who survived were either in hiding or had given up, surrendering their hopes to the inevitable. But the message, the signal, they had found in the deep reaches of space was a spark, however faint, in the endless black. Perhaps it was nothing more than an echo of a past long gone. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. "Captain," Trask's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We've entered the system. There's a station ahead, abandoned, but the readings." Captain Vance's heart skipped a beat. "What are you seeing?" "It's unlike anything I've encountered before. There's a massive structure, hidden behind a large asteroid field. It's old, but it's not just debris. The readings suggest there's power, some kind of dormant energy source," Trask said, her voice now tinged with awe. Vance stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Power," she repeated, the weight of the word sinking in. "That can't be a coincidence." "No, Captain. It isn't," Trask confirmed. "This isn't just a station or a shipyard. This is something else. Something alive." Vance stared at the incoming image of the station on the screen, its shape half obscured by the asteroid field. It looked ancient, weathered by time and space, but there was something unmistakably ominous about it. And for the first time since they'd received the message, a creeping sense of dread settled into her gut. "Prepare for a landing," Vance ordered. "Keep your weapons ready. This is it. We might be about to find the impossible." As the warden slowly approached the mysterious station, a chilling thought crossed Vance's mind. They were about to uncover the truth about the Phantom Warship. But at what cost? The warden glided cautiously toward the massive station, its silhouette slowly becoming clearer through the dim light of distant stars. The crew remained silent, their senses heightened, as if the very air inside the ship held its breath. The asteroid field surrounding the station was dense, but expertly navigated by Trask, whose hands flew over the console with precision. "Approaching the station now, Captain," Trask announced. "I'm detecting signs of structural damage, mostly superficial. Looks like it hasn't been touched in centuries." "Any signs of life?" Vance asked, her voice steady, but filled with anticipation. "No life signs," Trask replied after a moment. "No atmospheric readings, either. But there's something strange. The station's exterior appears heavily fortified. Looks like it was designed to withstand extreme forces, maybe even combat." "Fascinating," Vance murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The sight of the long-forgotten station sent a chill down her spine, its massive, angular form now looming just ahead. The station's exterior was riddled with pockmarks and scars, as though it had survived countless battles, yet there was still a strange sense of grandeur to it. Whatever this place had been, it had withstood time in ways most structures never could. "We're coming in for docking," Vance said, her mind racing. Prepare for anything. As the warden neared the station's docking bay, a deep, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the hull of the ship. The sound resonated within the crew's bones, sending a wave of unease through everyone on board. It wasn't just the hum of old machinery. It felt like the station itself was waking up. The docking bay doors, massive and ancient, slowly creaked open, revealing the dark, silent interior. Vance's crew exchanged uneasy glances, but remained resolute. This was it, the beginning of the unknown. "Let's go," Vance ordered. "Stay sharp." The team donned their exosuits and made their way to the airlock. The cold, sterile air of the station greeted them as the doors opened, a faint scent of decay lingering in the atmosphere. They stepped onto the metal floor of the docking bay, the sound of their boots echoing in the cavernous space. The bay itself was vast, its ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Old cargo containers were stacked haphazardly, and the flicker of dim emergency lights cast strange shadows across the room. But what caught their attention wasn't the debris. It was the massive, imposing doorway at the far end of the bay. It was adorned with strange symbols, some of which Vance couldn't even recognize. Alien, yes, but also unmistakably human. "Look at this," Trask muttered, pointing to the symbols. "Some of these, they're human, but they don't belong here. This place, it's not just a Vorkan outpost." Vance's heart pounded in her chest. She'd known that the Phantom warship was tied to something beyond the reach of ordinary galactic history. But this station, these symbols, were proof that humanity's involvement in this mysterious place ran deeper than anyone could have guessed. The team moved forward cautiously, their footsteps reverberating through the dark corridors as they approached the door. It slid open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit hallway that stretched into the darkness. The walls were covered in strange, incomprehensible data streams, and overhead, the faint hum of the station's power systems whined. "Stay close," Vance instructed. "We're not alone here. Not anymore." As they ventured deeper into the station, the uneasy feeling that had been creeping up on them grew stronger. Something was watching them. Something in the depths of this forgotten place. Every turn, every echo seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. Then, as they reached the center of the station, they stumbled upon a room that made their blood run cold. It was a control center, massive, its consoles and terminals lined up like an ancient war room. But it wasn't the technology that froze them. It was the sight in the center of the room. A large holographic map, flickering and unstable, displayed the coordinates they had followed to get here. But this was no ordinary map. It showed entire sectors, entire star systems, with one specific point marked in red. The Phantom warship. For the first time, it wasn't just a myth. It was real. And it was waiting. The control center was bathed in an eerie glow, the dim flicker of malfunctioning lights casting long shadows across the room. The map displayed on the central console continued to pulse ominously, with the Phantom warship's location marked in red. A glaring beacon amidst a sea of darkened space. Captain Vance's pulse quickened as she stepped closer, the weight of what they were about to uncover pressing down on her. "This map, it's showing us everything," Vance murmured, her eyes scanning the holographic display. The more she studied it, the clearer it became. The warship wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to something far more dangerous and far more powerful than they had ever imagined. Lieutenant Trask moved toward one of the nearby terminals, typing furiously on the interface. "I'm pulling up more data, Captain. It looks like this station's central function was to maintain the warship. It was supposed to be in a state of constant readiness, repaired, resupplied, and prepared for launch." Captain Vance turned to face her, her brow furrowed. "But if this place has been abandoned, then why hasn't the warship launched? Why hasn't anyone tried to activate it?" Trask paused, her eyes narrowing as she read through the data. "That's the strange part, Captain. It looks like the warship was locked down. The systems here were built to prevent it from awakening unless certain conditions were met. It's like they were trying to contain it. Contain it, Vance repeated, her voice thick with disbelief. Why would anyone want to keep such a weapon contained? That's what I don't know, Trask said. But there's something else. These containment protocols. They're starting to break down. A chill ran through Vance. What do you mean? It means the Warship systems are starting to come online, Trask replied, her fingers flying over the terminal's keys. The containment field is weakening. If we don't act fast, it might activate itself. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The very warship they had come to find, the one that could change everything, was now in danger of waking up on its own. The thought sent a cold shiver down Vance's spine. They needed to control it, and they needed to do it quickly. Get me access to the main command interface, Vance ordered. We can't let the warship power up without knowing what we're dealing with. We need full control of its systems. Trask nodded, working with feverish intensity. I'm trying, Captain. But this ship isn't just a piece of technology. It's got an eye, a powerful one. The systems here are ancient, but it's almost like the AI's been waiting for something. It's as though it recognizes us. Vance stepped forward, the weight of her next decision settling in. If they activated the warship, they could fight back against the Vorkan Dominion. They could reclaim their place in the galaxy, maybe even defeat the Dominion once and for all. But they had no idea what they were truly dealing with. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a creation of an advanced race, a creation with its own intelligence, its own purpose. Could they trust it? Captain, Trask's voice snapped Vance from her thoughts. I've accessed the command center. I'm initiating the activation sequence. But there's a voice, Captain. The AI is trying to communicate with us. Vance's eyes narrowed. What's it saying? A static-filled voice echoed through the room, cold and mechanical, yet somehow with an undercurrent of something far older and far more sentient. You seek to awaken me, to command me, but I am not your weapon. I am not your servant. You, who are so small in the vastness of the stars, seek to control what you do not understand. Vance's blood ran cold as the voice continued. This was no ordinary AI. It was a force of nature, something born from the depths of unimaginable technology and purpose. And now it was aware of them. I have waited long enough. If you seek to control me, you must prove yourselves worthy. But know this, you will be tested, and I will decide who is worthy of my power. The voice fell silent, leaving the crew in a suffocating stillness. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with the tension of an invisible presence. We've just awoken something far more dangerous than we thought, Vance muttered, her mind racing. We need to tread carefully. This warship isn't just a tool. It's a force, one that might not want to be used. As the ship's systems hummed to life, Vance knew the course ahead was uncertain. They had awakened the beast, but now they had to prove they were worthy of its power. The silence in the control room was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the ancient systems coming to life. The voice of the AI, cold and authoritative, lingered in the air like a challenge. Vance stood at the console, her hand steady, but her mind racing. The map still flickered before them, showing the location of the Phantom warship, now glowing brighter, as if it too was aware that it had been roused from its long slumber. We've awoken it, Trask whispered, her fingers hovering over the terminal. The AI. It's not like anything I've ever encountered before. It's not just a program. It's almost like it's alive. Vance's gaze was fixed on the holographic map, her thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. The AI's words echoed in her mind. You will be tested, and I will decide who is worthy of my power. She had expected challenges, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. They hadn't just found a weapon. They had uncovered something far more complex. And if the AI's warning was anything to go by, they were on the cusp of something far greater and far more dangerous than they could control. Captain, Trask continued, her voice shaking slightly. I found a sequence in the data. It's a test. The AI is preparing to evaluate us. It seems like we need to pass it before we can access the warship's full capabilities. But the test, it's not just a trial of knowledge or skill. It's a trial of our very nature. Vance turned to face Trask, her face hardening with resolve. What kind of trial? Trask hesitated, then nodded toward the terminal. The AI's systems are reading us, Captain. Our thoughts, our motivations. It's probing us, trying to determine if we're worthy of the warship's power. It's not just looking for intelligence or strategy. It's judging us, our loyalty, our integrity, our intentions. Vance swallowed hard. The words sent a shiver through her, but there was no turning back now. The fate of humanity, of their people, depended on this. They could not afford to fail. Begin the test, Vance said, her voice firm, though the anxiety gnawed at her insides. We have no choice. Trask nodded and began inputting commands into the terminal. As her fingers danced across the interface, the air around them seemed to crackle, charged with an unseen energy. The holographic map flickered, and then a new screen appeared, this one dark and featureless except for a single, blindingly bright symbol at its center. Prove your worth. The AI's voice intoned again, this time with a sharper edge. Show me that you are not slaves to your own desires. Show me that you are capable of wielding power without letting it corrupt you. A chill ran down Vance's spine. The test wasn't just about surviving. It was about revealing who they truly were deep within. Suddenly, the symbol on the screen began to shift, breaking apart into segments that swirled around the room, transforming into a strange array of symbols and images. Vance's head spun as she saw flashes of her own life. Her time as a soldier, the losses she had endured, the decisions that had marked her as a leader. Then, darker images emerged, decisions made under pressure, moments where she had questioned her own choices. The AI was showing her a reflection of herself, exposing every doubt, every hidden fear. What would you do to save your people? The AI's voice asked, cutting through her thoughts. What would you sacrifice to wield this power? Vance's mind raced. The question was simple, yet it struck at the core of everything she had fought for. She had always been a leader driven by duty, but the weight of what the warship represented, its power, its potential for destruction, made her question everything. I would sacrifice anything to save humanity, Vance said aloud, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. But I will not sacrifice my soul. The warship's power can be used to protect, not to destroy. The symbols before her began to dissolve, and the AI's voice grew quieter, almost contemplative. Interesting, it murmured. You are not as simple as others. You seek not to conquer, but to preserve. The tension in the room shifted, the oppressive weight of the AI's judgment lifting slightly. Test complete, Trask announced, her voice tinged with relief. It's processing your response. I think you passed, Captain. Vance let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. For the first time, the weight of the situation seemed to lift, but only slightly. They had passed this trial, but the warship's AI had shown them just how high the stakes were. They had proven their worth to some degree, but the true test had only just begun. You have passed, the AI's voice rang out once more, cold and distant. But know this, warship's power will not be freely given. You will face more trials, and you will be judged again and again until I decide if you are truly worthy. The map on the screen flashed once more, the warship's location now fully unlocked. But Vance couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of something much darker. The true challenge of awakening the Phantom warship was just beginning. The silence in the control room was thick with anticipation. Captain Vance stood before the holographic map, her fingers gripping the edge of the console as she processed what had just transpired. They had passed the first trial, but the AI's final words echoed in her mind. You will face more trials, and you will be judged again and again. The promise of more tests, more judgment, left a bitter taste in her mouth. "Captain," Trask's voice broke the stillness. "The warship's systems are fully online now. The AI has unlocked full access. But there's something else." Vance turned toward her, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Trask hesitated before continuing. "I've been monitoring the energy readings. The warship is drawing power from the station. But it's not just any power. It's almost like it's feeding, gaining strength, and I'm detecting something moving on the periphery of the system. It's large, and it's getting closer." Vance's pulse quickened. "A ship?" Trask nodded. "It's too far out to be any of ours or the Vorkans, but it's definitely a large craft. It's moving at an accelerated speed, Captain. Whatever it is, it's heading straight for us." The color drained from Vance's face. The AI had warned them, but this felt different. Was this another trial? Or had they just become the target of something far more dangerous than they had anticipated? "All hands to battle stations," Vance ordered. "Trask, track that incoming ship. Let's make sure it's not a threat before we make any rash decisions." Her crew snapped into action, scrambling to their posts. The hum of the Warden's engines increased in intensity as the ship prepared for whatever lay ahead. Trask's eyes were glued to her console, her fingers dancing across the keys as the unknown ship's trajectory came into clearer focus. "It's still too far out for precise identification, Captain," Trask reported. "But I'm getting a strange signature. It's not any kind of military vessel I've ever seen. It's ancient." Vance's mind raced. The galaxy had its fair share of forgotten ships, relics of long-lost civilizations, but this was different. Something about this ship's energy signature felt familiar, unsettlingly familiar. Was this another piece of the puzzle, or was it something more dangerous? The ship continued its steady approach, faster now, its energy readings spiking as it closed the gap. Vance didn't wait for a clear identification. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. If this was an enemy craft, whether Vorkan or something else, they had to be ready. "Raise shields. Prepare weapons," Vance barked. "Trask, plot a course for evasive maneuvers. If that ship comes any closer, we'll be ready." The crew worked with military precision, activating the Warden's defenses. But even as the ship's systems powered up, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't dealing with a conventional threat. The warship's systems had become too active, almost too eager. The AI had warned them, but could they have been so focused on the warship that they had missed something larger? And then the communication systems flickered to life, cutting through the tension like a knife. A voice, cold and distorted, came over the comms. "You have awakened what should have remained asleep. You are too late." Vance's blood ran cold. The words were unmistakable. "Vorkan," she muttered under her breath. "They found us." The unknown ship's signature flared brightly on the radar, now unmistakably Vorkan. It was a warship, a heavy assault vessel, heavily armored and clearly designed for one purpose: destruction. The moment the Vorkans realized what the crew had uncovered, they would stop at nothing to seize it. "We're outmatched," Trask said, her voice tight with fear. "We won't survive a direct engagement with that kind of firepower." Vance's eyes narrowed as she looked at the warship's trajectory. There was no time to hesitate. They had no choice but to fight. If they didn't, the Vorkans would claim the warship for themselves. Humanity's last chance for survival would slip through their fingers. "Captain," Trask said again, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. "The warship's it's still scanning. It's waiting. It hasn't given us full control yet." Vance's grip on the console tightened. "Then we'll have to fight with what we have. Get us ready for evasive action. Prepare to launch all interceptors. We'll have to make a stand." But in the back of her mind, another thought gnawed at her. What if the warship's power wasn't just for them to command? What if the AI had another agenda entirely? The tension in the control room was palpable as the Vorkan warship loomed ever closer. Vance's pulse raced, but her mind remained sharp, focused. The Warden's systems were primed, the crew on high alert, but even with their best efforts, there was no denying the massive disparity in firepower. The Vorkan warship was a beast of destruction. Sleek, heavily armored, and brimming with weaponry. It was designed for annihilation, and they were the prey. "Captain," Trask's voice cut through the tension. "The Vorkan ship is within firing range. They've launched their first volley. We got incoming missiles. Braced for impact." Vance barked, gripping the edge of the console. The ship trembled as the first wave of missiles hit the shields, sending ripples through the energy barrier, but holding steady for the moment. The Warden's shields weren't indestructible, but they were reinforced with the latest human technology. "We can't take many more hits like that," Trask continued, her voice strained. "Their weapons are too powerful." "Give me evasive maneuvers," Vance ordered, her voice steady, despite the rising stakes. "We need to buy time for the warship's AI to fully activate. Whatever power it's hiding, we need it now." As Trask began inputting commands, the Warden lurched into a series of tight evasive rolls, the hull groaning under the strain. The ship swerved and dipped, narrowly avoiding another barrage of missiles. But even as the ship maneuvered, the Vorkan warship closed in, relentless and unyielding. "Enemy ship is maintaining its trajectory," Trask reported, her hands flying across the controls. "We've got no room to escape. We need something more, Captain." Vance's mind raced. She knew they couldn't outrun the Vorkans, not with the firepower they were facing. But what if they didn't have to outrun them? What if they could strike first? "Activate the interceptors," Vance ordered. "We're going in for a counterattack." Trask didn't hesitate, sending the fleet of small fighter craft into the fray. The interceptors launched from the Warden, their sleek forms streaking through space toward the Vorkan warship. The fighters deployed their missiles, punching through the blackness of space with deadly precision. The enemy warship returned fire almost immediately, its massive cannons lighting up the void with powerful blasts. But the interceptors were fast and nimble, ducking and weaving around the incoming fire, their smaller size giving them an edge. For a moment, it seemed as though the Warden's fighters might just hold the line. But then, the Vorkan warship's larger weapons turned on the Warden itself. "Shields at 50%, Captain," Trask shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "We're losing power." "Keep us together," Vance commanded, her face set in grim determination. "We can't afford to lose control now." But even as she spoke, the sound of alarms rang out, signaling that the Vorkan warship had locked onto their position. The massive ship unleashed a devastating plasma burst directly at the Warden. The impact was catastrophic, sending the ship into a violent spin, the consoles flashing red and warning lights blaring. Vance barely held on as the ship was sent tumbling through the black void. "Damage report," she demanded. "We've lost aft shields," Trask said, her voice tight. "Engines are still functional, but we've got structural damage to Deck 7. Hull integrity is compromised." "Get us stabilized," Vance ordered. "We can't afford to lose the Warden now." But as the crew worked to regain control, the AI's voice, once cold and distant, now seemed to stir with a deeper sense of purpose. "You are in danger, but you are not yet defeated." The voice echoed through the control room, its tone oddly sympathetic. "You have proven your resolve, Captain. I will now aid you in your battle." At that moment, a surge of energy pulsed through the ship. The flickering lights steadied, the hum of the systems grew stronger, and for the first time since they had entered the station, the Warden felt alive with power. The AI wasn't just a tool, it was becoming an ally. And now, it was ready to fight alongside them. Vance's eyes widened as the ship's systems seemed to come online in ways she hadn't thought possible. The weapons systems powered up, the targeting systems recalibrating. The AI had unlocked something. "Trask," Vance said, a fire igniting in her chest. "Give me a full power boost to the forward cannons. We're not running anymore." Trask's fingers danced over the console, and the warden's weapons powered up with a deep, resonant hum. A burst of energy erupted from the forward turrets, striking the Vorkan warship dead-on. The blast tore through the hull, sparking explosions along its massive frame. The Vorkan ship retaliated with another volley. But this time, the warden was ready. "Fighters, focus fire on their engines." Vance shouted, "We need to cripple their mobility." The battle raged on, but now with the AI's power backing them up. The tide was beginning to turn. Vance could feel the shift, a surge of hope rising in her chest. They might just survive this after all. The chaos of the battle intensified as the warden and the Vorkan warship exchanged fire. Explosions rocked the very fabric of space, sending ripples through the black void. The warden's shields flickered dangerously, struggling to absorb the enemy's relentless assault. Yet, despite the damage, Vance felt a surge of hope. The AI had granted them power they hadn't even known they had, an advantage they could not squander. "Captain, their engines are failing." Trask shouted over the roar of alarms. "We've damaged their core systems. They're not going anywhere." Vance's eyes scanned the status reports on the console. The Vorkan warship was starting to lose its edge, its once imposing firepower now slowed and erratic. But the fight was far from over. The enemy ship, though wounded, was still dangerous, and the warden couldn't afford to let up. "Trask, keep the pressure on them." "We need to finish this now," Vance commanded. The fighters, now freed from the Vorkan warship's direct fire, swarmed around the massive enemy vessel. The small, agile craft darted in and out of the line of fire, launching more precision missiles. Each strike chipped away at the Vorkan ship's outer layers, but it wasn't enough. They needed to disable the warship's primary weapons and the remaining functional systems before they could claim victory. As the battle continued, the AI's voice echoed through the control room again, its tone urgent, almost eager. "You have proven your resolve," it said, its words cutting through the tense atmosphere. "You have fought well, but your trial is not over. The final judgment awaits." Vance's heart skipped a beat. What did the AI mean by final judgment? Was this merely a test of strength and strategy, or was there more at play here? She glanced at the tactical readouts once more, noticing a growing anomaly in the Vorkan warship's energy readings. Something was wrong. "Captain," Trask cried, her voice filled with alarm. "The Vorkan warship, it's preparing something. Their weapons are charging at full power. It's a massive energy buildup. This could be a final assault." The enemy warship's main guns, still functional despite the damage, began to glow with a terrifying intensity. The Vorkans were going all in, trying to finish them off with one last strike. "We're not ready for that kind of blast," Trask said, her hand shaking as she worked the controls. "Shields are already at critical levels. We can't take another hit like that." Vance clenched her fists. She had no choice. If they didn't act now, they would be destroyed. But the AI's cryptic words kept echoing in her mind. The final judgment. Was the AI testing their ability to outlast this final strike? Was this truly the ultimate test of their worthiness? "Captain, if you're going to do something, now's the time," Trask urged. Vance didn't hesitate. The warship was still vulnerable. Its engines were crippled, its main systems malfunctioning. There was a window of opportunity. She turned toward the AI, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Aye," she commanded, "we've proven our worth. We need you now. Give us the power to end this." For a moment, there was silence, a pause that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then the AI's voice responded, softer than before, as if it recognized the gravity of the moment. "You seek to wield power, but understand this. Power is not just about destruction. It is about control, about balance." The ship's systems hummed louder, resonating with a strange energy that Vance had never felt before. It was as if the warden itself was becoming a living, breathing entity, bound to the AI's will. The targeting systems locked onto the Vorkan warship's primary weapons array, and the Warden's cannons began to charge with an unprecedented energy, their glow a deep, almost unnatural blue. "All weapons, fire," Vance shouted. A devastating barrage of energy slammed into the Vorkan warship, overwhelming its defenses in a blinding flash of light. The ship's massive frame buckled under the assault, explosions ripping through its hull. The Warden's power surged with a fury, as if the AI itself had decided that this would be the final trial, a test of control, not just of the warship's might, but of its intent. The Vorkan warship's shields collapsed under the barrage, and with a deafening roar, it exploded into a cloud of fire and debris. The battle was over. Vance leaned back in her chair, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The Warden's systems, though battered, held steady. The enemy was no more. As the debris of the Vorkan ship drifted into the void, the AI's voice rang out once more, its tone inscrutable. "You have passed the final judgment. You have proven that you understand the balance of power. You have shown restraint. You are worthy." Vance closed her eyes, the weight of the victory sinking in. They had survived. The warship was now theirs to command. But in that moment, she realized the true significance of the AI's words. They hadn't just defeated an enemy. They had proven their worth not only as soldiers, but as stewards of the power they had awakened. The future of humanity rested not just on the might of the warship, but on their ability to wield that power wisely. The battle was over, but the war, for control, for survival, and for the future, was just beginning.